How is your soul doing? How is your soul doing? It's kind of a weird question, right? It's probably one you don't get asked a lot. I've never been asked that question. And before we rush past that and offer some sort of, religious platitude, like, oh, it is well with my soul, I know that's what the hymn says. But if you know the story, it took the writer of that hymn a while to get before he could say that. So how is your soul doing? It's not a question that I think we come across. But perhaps it shouldn't be so weird of a question after all, right? I mean, we ask each other, how are you doing all the time? It's almost just like a throwaway greeting, right? Hey, how you doing? How's it going? In fact, I mentioned to a couple of people as I came here today, almost everybody I ran across, how are you doing? And, the answer that we give is either going to be some superficial throwaway answer, because we know it's just a superficial throwaway greeting. Hey, how you doing? Good, right? But maybe we do give like a genuine answer, right? Maybe we understand that it's a real question from somebody that loves us and they want to know how we're doing. But think about how normally we answer that question. How are you doing? I'm good. Yeah. I went on vacation. I got some sun. I got tan. I got to lay out on the beach for a while. I relaxed, right? So what are we doing? We're answering from the physical aspect of who we are because we think that's what they're asking about. How are you doing? Well, my body's doing pretty well. I'm relatively healthy. I'm feeling pretty rested. Or maybe it's the opposite, right? Maybe your body's not doing good. Maybe you are tired because you've been running around doing a million things. Or maybe you just got a diagnosis from the doctor, right? So they ask, how are you doing? And you say, not so good because my body, fill in the blank, right? But maybe we go a little deeper. Someone asks how you're doing. And we're bold enough to let them know how we're doing mentally. Lately, I've been doing pretty good. I'm pretty happy. Things are going pretty well. There's not a lot of stress in my life right now. I'm thinking clearly, or maybe it's not going so well. And you let them know, I'm really stressed. I've got these decisions looming, and I don't know what to do. And so we give an answer of how we're doing from the mental aspect. And I think that's where we generally keep it, either physical or mental. But by doing so, we're really only ever addressing or acknowledging 2/3 of who we are as a person. Because we are body, yes, mind, yes, and a soul. God, in his triune nature, created us in his image as tripartite beings. We have 3 parts, body, mind, and soul. Some people add a 4th and say spirit. I'm more of a tripartite kind of guy. I believe that it's the 3. But just think about that. If someone asks you, how are you doing? How inclined are you to let them know, my soul is not doing well today? Do we even know that it's okay to say that? Or are we worried, perhaps, that if we give any answer other than some sort of, cursory platitude, like it is well with my soul, or how could it not be going well? I'm redeemed, right? Bodies get tired, and they need rest. Minds get tired, and they need rest. And what I've come to discover is that souls get tired too, even redeemed ones. And they need rest as well. And that's why Jesus, in one of his most famous lines in Matthew 11, verses 28 and 30, said, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am humble and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul." He's saying it. He's saying souls can get tired. And when they do, they need rest. And that is true of those who have never found the rest that Christ offers them, who've never received salvation. But what I have found over the last couple of years is that redeemed souls get tired. And we need to know how to press in and find that rest that is there for us to grasp. We just need to know how. And so this is something that, like I said, I have had to learn from experience. I try to be a vulnerable guy everywhere I am, and so that applies up here. I tend to share. Maybe I overshare. I don't know, but I share with you guys everything I'm going through. I came across this quote one time. It said that the greatest gift that a pastor can ever give their congregation is their transforming self. And I've always found that to be true. Those are the pastors I learn from the most, and that's the pastor I'm trying to be. It's just the person I'm trying to be. And so I'm vulnerable up here for a number of reasons, right? And I know that, I think it was a week or two before Allie had the baby, and then I went on leave, I shared with you guys that I could tell that something was wrong, but I couldn't figure it out. It felt like depression or something, and I'm like, maybe it was because it was a long winter, I don't know. And well, then I took 5 weeks off of ministry, and God was so gracious to give me the space and the permission to ask that question. God, what is going on here? And the answer that I got was, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give rest to your souls. And that's when I realized my soul is tired. And that led me on an adventure of trying to figure out why, and then what can be done about it. And so it's no wonder then that during that time, as I was looking through Luke chapter 15, knowing that I'd be preaching on it when I came back, Jesus has his main point in this message, which I addressed last week, but then there's a lot within this chapter that we can take that may not be Jesus' main point, but it's there, and it's there for the taking. And so today, what I want to do is I just want to revisit that chapter again, and I want to show you what it is that the Lord led me to. Not because I just feel like, being voyeuristic with my soul and just showing you what I'm going through. If that was the case, I would have left all that stuff in my quiet time with God and been happy that he taught it to me. But a result of it was I started thinking through the people that I know here. And there was a good number of faces that came to mind of people who I think may have fallen into the same trap that I did, and like me, didn't even know it. And so I'm hoping that by sharing this with you, you too will find the rest for your soul that perhaps has eluded you for so long. So I am not going to really use a PowerPoint today because last week it just frustrated me so much. I'm just going to not do it. I'm actually just going to put this over here. And I know we're not in the habit of bringing Bibles with us because I usually have the text up there. For the next foreseeable future, though, I'm going to try and actually just stick to us bringing Bibles. I know that the King James Pew Bibles there are going to be tough for a lot of you guys to follow because I'm reading from the ESV. So if you're not in the habit of bringing a Bible with you, maybe start. It's always a good practice anyways because you never know. We might not have power, right? So be relying on the good old book. But that's where I'm going to be today. We're in Luke chapter 15. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. The other ones, I'll just mention where they are, and I won't expect you to be able to flip there very quickly. I have them marked. But Luke chapter 15, as I said last week, I'll say it again this week. I believe this is one of the most important chapters in the entire Bible. It's a really bold statement, but I stand on it. I think this is one of the most important chapters in the entire Bible. So let's just read the whole thing again, because it's just that good. It says in verse 1, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.' So he told them this parable. 'What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, doesn't light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost." Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. And he said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son, gathered all he had, and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I'll arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" There's a lot there. There's a lot that we can take from that. Last week, I talked about what I believe is Jesus' main point, which is that he's a better brother than the older brother in that story, who was really a picture of the Pharisees and scribes, who, like the older brother, couldn't even get themselves to refer to these Jewish men as their brothers. They just said these sinners. But Jesus is a better brother than that. He was not content to sit in the Father's house gloating over the fact that the inheritance was all his now because this stupid younger brother of his had gone off living recklessly. Jesus is the type of brother who came to seek and save his lost brothers and sisters. And so he came and found us and brought us back to the Father's house. Now today, I want to touch on an aspect of this that, like I said, I don't think this is the main point of the story at all, but it's something that because of the season of life that I'm in, God showed me from it. And because of where I think a good number of us are, I want to share it with you guys as well. And it all kind of hinges on the mistake that both brothers made. I think we tend to look at these brothers and think, maybe one of them is slightly better off than the other, but actually both sons are horrible sons. They are not role models. They are not people we want to emulate in any kind of way, right? The role model of this story is first and foremost the father, but also I think he's kind of implied between the lines is actually Jesus, who is showing us that he's not that kind of brother who's just content to leave his brothers dead. He goes and finds them. So if we look at this mistake that both sons made, I'll start with the older son because I think he's the easier one to pick on. He's the one that most of us tend to look at and go, I can't believe this guy, right? So what was the older son's mistake? Well, the older son's mistake was that he thought that he deserved his father's favor. Why? Well, he said so. I have served you all these many years. I have never disobeyed one of your commands. Right? So he had mistakenly thought that through his servitude and through his obedience, he deserved the Father's favor. Now, if we look then at the younger son, we find that he actually makes the same exact mistake. He comes back to the father with this plan, right? He's still sitting there in the filth of the pig pen, and he's coming up with this plan. And he puts together a speech. And what's the speech, right? Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just let me serve in your house as a hired servant. You see, he's coming back to the father, hoping that if he displays the same kind of mindset as his older brother, that he can somehow win his way back into the father's favor. And so what's he doing with that request? I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just bring me in as a hired servant. He's looking at mercy like a loan. He's looking at the father's favor as something that he can pay back. Father, if you'll be so gracious to let me just come back into the house, I will work this off. So what's his plan? To serve him for many years and to obey all of his commands. So his whole plan hinges on becoming more like the older brother. But the father wouldn't hear any of it. And I love this, right? Let's just flip there again. The younger son, he puts together this whole plan, and then he comes back, and the father cuts him off. But notice where he cuts him off, right? The younger son plans to come back and say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Bring me in as a hired servant. So notice where the father cuts him off. Before he can even ask to be brought back in as a servant. The father hears him say the words, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, and he says, nope, get the best robe. Bring it, put it on him. Bring a ring, put it on his hand. Bring sandals, put it on his feet. All of that was meant to symbolize, you never stopped being my son. No, I'm not even going to hear this nonsense of you coming into my house as a servant. You're my son, and you're home, and that's enough. And we're going to celebrate. Before you can do anything for me, I'm killing the most precious thing I have. I'm killing the fattened calf that we've been storing up probably because we were going to sell for a decent amount of money. I'm taking that, I'm slaughtering it, and I'm throwing a celebration. I'm bringing everyone I know to celebrate the fact that you are back, not as a servant, but as a son. And so it's interesting to me, both of these sons have the same mistaken view of their father, but realistically what it is, it's a picture of their misunderstanding of grace. The older son thought that the father's favor was something he deserved, because he'd been doing everything he's supposed to. He's been serving in the fields all these years. He never disobeyed the father's commands. He's been a good boy. Why hasn't he gotten a young goat? Why are you killing the fattened calf for this disobedient son of yours? His whole anger is fueled by the fact that he genuinely believes he deserves the father's favor. But the father is so merciful to him. You know, we kind of miss it in the story, but the son is being so incredibly rude to his father because there's a party going on. Right? This is all kind of in between the lines, but there's a party going on, and everybody must see this older son standing outside the doorway, maybe even in the doorpost, just looking in, I can't believe this old man. Look at what a fool to bring this kid back in the house. And everybody must see it. That's why the father actually goes out to the son. And it says he entreats him. Such a special word. He speaks so gently to him, trying to lure him back in. Like, son, why are you being like this? Why are you so upset? Your brother was gone. He's home. And the elder son's response must break the father's heart. And you can kind of get a glimpse of that by the way the father responds. Son, you're always with me. We're going to talk about this more next week. Son, you're always with me. I mean, everything I have is yours, which is true, right? With the way that the inheritance would have worked is the younger son would have gotten 1/3 of the estate. The elder son would have gotten 2/3. So when the father split the estate and probably liquidated a bunch of assets, gave the cash to the younger son, who then went off and, blew all the money, that really did mean that everything that the elder son saw and touched belonged to him. It was actually already his. It said the father divided it between them. So the father says to this, impertinent older son, who so incredibly mistakes the heart of his father, "Son, I don't understand what the problem is. You already have everything I would think you'd want. You're with me all the time. Everything you see is yours." But the son's angry because he didn't feel like the father had done enough for him. He didn't feel like the father was showing him enough favor, which he had quite obviously deserved through his obedience and servitude. And the younger son comes back with that same mindset. It's what it is. It's the misunderstanding of grace. The word grace, defined, means unmerited favor. It means you're getting treated well even though you don't deserve it. Even whether you think you deserve it or not. So the father's heart towards that elder son, that grace that he showed him, it didn't have anything to do with the years of servitude and with the perfect obedience. And the favor and grace that he shows to the younger son didn't really have anything to do with the reckless living and squandering. He showed them favor even though they didn't deserve it. It's grace. And so, as we think about that for us, do we really understand how free God's grace is to us? I think most of us probably accept the older son's mistake. We can see it, right? We've got Ephesians 2, 8 and 10 in mind. Right? Salvation is a free gift of God, not by works, so that no man can boast. We know that you can't do anything to earn this. You can't buy this. You can't work your way towards salvation. But here's the hang-up. You also can't pay it back. You can't approach the Father with a heart that says, "I appreciate you letting me back into the house. Now let me start working that off." That is a recipe for an exhausted soul. And I know that because that's exactly what I did. And if you would have told me that 2 months ago, I'd have said, "Nah, I don't think that's right." But that's exactly the trap that I fell into. And I know a lot of you know my story. Maybe some of you don't. But God took me all the way back to the beginning. When I was in a junky old pickup truck driving down the road, listening to a gospel presentation that finally hit home. And I pulled over, weeping, and accepted Christ into my heart. And I remember saying to him, "If you will really forgive me for everything I've ever done, I will give my whole life to you." And I came to realize in the last several weeks that I was making the mistake of the younger son. And I planted a seed way back then that started to bear fruit within the last year. I thought that it was my responsibility now to work it off. And so I attach all kinds of things to that. My, performance as a pastor, which comes by way of, ratings. That sounds kind of a crude way to say it, but when people leave the church, it devastated me on so many levels. Not just because it hurts to see somebody walk away, but because that obviously means I'm doing a bad job, and if I'm doing a bad job at paying God back for his grace to me, he's obviously not pleased with me. So then comes the stress, then comes the anxiety, then comes the depression, then comes the exhaustion that no amount of sleep can ever seem to shake off. So I didn't even know it. And I fell into that trap of accidentally thinking that God's grace was like a loan to me, that I needed to pay back with interest. And I needed to do that by working hard in the Father's house. Now, like I said, if I felt that I was alone in that, I would have left this lesson in my devotional time with God. But as I started really understanding what happened to me, quite a few faces came to mind of people who I think may have accidentally fallen into that trap too, and maybe didn't even realize it. That the motivation for serving God is in one way or another connected to how much you know He's forgiven you. And this feeling that after everything God has done for me, surely I must at least do this. That's the question that I think many of us don't even realize how dangerous it actually is. After all that God has done to forgive a sinner like me, surely I must at least do this to work it off, to pay it back. It's a very, very slippery slope, and it's an insidious kind of lie because it's one that wouldn't even present itself as being really all that bad or all that dangerous. In fact, I think there are entire ministries out there who push us to feel that way. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe I listened to one too many of those kinds of sermons or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's you. I don't know how or why we bought that bill of goods. But as I look around, I see at least 5 faces of people that I fear might have actually fallen into that trap. And the motivation for our service in the house is guilt and not joy. And that is a recipe for an exhausted soul. And so what do we do then? How is it that we find that rest for our souls that Jesus promised? He said if we come to Him with our weary and heavy laden souls and take His yoke upon us and learn from Him, that He will give those tired souls rest. So how, if that's you, how do we find our way back to those green pastures and still waters where He will restore our soul? Well, all I can really do is share with you the path that God has had me on in trying to find that place of rest again. And it actually ties in pretty interestingly with an Old Testament passage from Jeremiah chapter 6, where the prophet, actually God speaking through the prophet, says, "Look for the ancient paths. Follow them, and you will find rest for your souls." And so I think it's interesting that I remembered that verse after God kind of providentially led me to a couple of ancient practices that I want to share with you, because in Protestant Christianity, I think we've done a disservice by separating ourselves from a lot of the contemplative practices that are so common in the Catholic and Orthodox faiths. Not that I necessarily advertise those, traditions as being the thing to follow. But when Luther began to try and separate from the Catholic Church, he never actually had in mind that we would just take the whole thing and burn it. Actually, there's funny stories of people doing that and Luther losing his mind. There's a lot of things that I don't know that we should have walked away from that we did. And when it comes to contemplative Christianity, I think that's one of those things that I can't find anything that is distinctly Catholic or Orthodox about it. Contemplative Christianity is being intentionally slow and creating a lot of space for your soul to just rest and breathe in the presence of God. That's really what contemplative Christianity is about. And so there's a bunch of practices, and a number of them I'd learned about in the past, and I've begun kind of re-practicing them again. One of them is known as Lectio Divina. Has anybody ever heard of that? Ron? It's a Latin couple of words. It means divine reading. It's a different way of reading your Bible than perhaps many of us are used to. Some of us are pretty good at being consistent with a daily devotional kind of Bible reading. So maybe you're following a reading plan. You're going to read through the Bible in a year or 3 years. You're going to read through the New Testament in 6 months or a year. But when you do that, what we would say you're reading for breadth, right? You're sort of trying to gain an understanding of the entire landscape of Scripture, which is a really good practice. But then there's reading for depth as well. There's taking a passage and just soaking in a passage, or even a verse sometimes, and just letting that verse kind of work its way past your mind, through your heart, into your soul. And Lectio Divina is a really good practice for doing that. The ancient practice of it is basically just 5 readings. So you take a portion of a psalm, like Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am the Lord." And you read that, and you just kind of sit, meditate on that, give yourself 5-10 minutes, just thinking about that. Be still and know that I am the Lord. And then you read it again. And what you're listening for is just maybe a word or a phrase that God is highlighting for you, that he wants you to grab a hold of because of the season of life that you're in right now. Because Scripture is alive and active, right? And so the same Psalm 46:10, when you come to it, maybe it's the word still. Be still and know that I am the Lord. And then 5 years down the road, you come back to it and you're sitting reading it again, and it's no. Be still and know that I am the Lord. Right? It's amazing how if we do this, the Lord will just highlight a word or a phrase that you realize that's the thing that God's been trying to say to me. It's right there. Know that I am the Lord. Do I know? What does it mean to know? Like, I know it, but do I know it? Right? And that's what this Lectio Divina can do for you. It makes you intentionally slow down, take the time to quiet your mind, and create the space for your soul to converse with God, as he just gives you an entire sermon in 1 or 3 words. And he does this all the time. This is an ancient practice, and it is a good one. Lectio Divina. Another one, silence and solitude. I think these two go perfectly well together. It's really hard to really engage in that kind of divine reading in a really noisy space. And so you go and you just find some kind of space where you can be alone and you try and quiet yourself. Not externally, that's easy, just don't talk. When's the last time you tried to pursue inner silence? Has anybody tried to do that? Try it sometime. Oh my goodness, is it hard to do, especially for the ADHD people. Oh my goodness, is it a challenge. I find nature to be a sanctuary in this way. Nature has a way of quieting my soul. I can listen to the birds. It's not necessarily completely externally silent, but in that place with the babbling brook and the birds singing, my soul becomes at rest. And it can actually begin to converse freely with God. So silence and solitude, Lectio Divina. Another really good one is this thing called divine hours, or sometimes they'll call it the daily offices or the divine offices. The Lutheran faith, I believe, tradition, I believe, actually still engages in this quite a bit. I know like the Anglicans and Episcopalians, they all do. What it is it's set times throughout the day when you pray. And so 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever it may be, right? You just set a timer in your phone to remind yourself that in the busyness of your day, he is the most important thing. And you're going to take time every time that timer goes off, and you're going to pray. This is actually a really good time to look into written prayers. I find those to be really helpful. You know, like St. Augustine has a whole bunch of written prayers that are amazing to read. And there are so many of them down through the ages that we could benefit a lot from reading and praying prayers that have already kind of been written down for us. The divine hours. And then the last one I'll mention, one of these ancient pathways, is a thing called daily examine. So daily examine is best done at the end of the day. And what it is it's a time where, again, you just kind of sit. You got to take some time to pursue that inner silence, that peace from within. And when you find that place, you ask God to reveal to you all of the places where his presence was manifest throughout the day, all the ways in which he showed up throughout that day. And you're just asking him to help you see that. Because I'm telling you, we are so busy, we are so distracted, we miss it. Like if I was to ask you just every single Sunday, hey, where did you see God last week? How many of you are like, I got 15 different times I can show you God showed up, right? Because we don't really stop and think about it. But if you work through that, I mean, do we really think that God is just sort of aloof in our daily lives? No. We know he's there. He's with us everywhere we go. Daily Examine is a daily opportunity to stop and ask him to show you where he showed up that day. So that then if I ask you tomorrow, hey, where did God show up yesterday? You'd be like, oh man, I was out in the woods and sitting there, this deer popped out, and I knew that he was communicating something to me, and those things become more readily accessible to our mind the more that we actually stop and think about it. So anyways, let me just kind of tie all that together here. Silence and solitude, lectio divina, divine hours, daily examine. Each of them, in their own right, goes a long way to restoring a weary soul. What's cool in our modern day and age is we have these little computers that we carry around in our pocket. I have a love-hate relationship with this thing. You guys know that. I'm trying to have a healthy relationship with it. One way I found to do that is to put good stuff in it. Instead of just being mad about all the bad stuff that's in it, like YouTube, I put good stuff in it. One of the good things I put in there recently is this app called Lectio 365, and they do an amazing job of tying all of those things together in a really sleek, really, really easy to use and easy to digest way. They literally just read it to you. You don't even have to read. I know reading is like not something we do anymore, right? But we can listen to it. And I would actually encourage you to not just read it because you'll probably just fly through it. When it says pause and reflect, you'll be like, right, on to the next thing, right? When you listen to it, they do. They will stop for like what feels like an uncomfortable amount of time. And you're like, if I was reading this, I would be on to the next thing already. Be like, no, I'm going to let my soul breathe. I've been doing that. They have a morning, midday, and evening. So they're tying together the daily offices, just with 3 of them. They're doing Lectio Divina by sort of repeating this passage for you, maybe from a couple of different translations. It's awesome. And I have found rest for a weary soul. It has been very helpful for me. That, and having read a book that Ron referred me to a long time ago by a guy named Brother Lawrence called Practicing the Presence. One of my favorite parts about that, this guy who is like renowned through the ages as being like the guy on practicing the presence of God, one of the things he said the most, he never really beat himself up when he would like walk away from this for a while. He'd come back, not being bothered by how much time he had let pass, and he would just resume. And I find that to be really helpful. So, there are many pathways back to that place of rest that perhaps you once enjoyed, but one way or another you've wandered away from. And you, like me, like the younger son from that story in Luke 15, have been wearying your soul with this idea that you have to work off God's grace. The more that you can sit to be still and know that He is God, the more you find rest in Jesus' completed work for you. The more you realize that when He, the better brother, went out and found you and brought you home, He didn't bring you home to be a servant. He brought you home to be a son and a daughter. And the Father is just happy that you're back. Now, is there work to do? Of course, there's work to do in every family and in every home. But we're not doing it so that we can pay back God for the grace that He has shown us. Because if that's the case, then it's not really grace. Grace is free. Truly free. That's what makes it so amazing. Let's pray. God, I do thank You for the rest that You have purchased for Your people. And I pray for every one of us here because I know that there are a lot of us who, if we take the time and sit with You, we will find out as well that it's really not physical fatigue that we struggle with. And it's not mental fatigue. It's something else. And I think a good number of us, Lord, have very tired souls because we haven't really come to discover what it means to rest in your perfect finished work for us. So Lord, I pray that every time that we find ourselves tired, that we would run back to you. We would find our way back to that place of rest that you have secured for us. Lord, I pray that you would help each and every one of us to discover what it means to pursue this every day, so that even if we're not somebody who's fallen into this trap, so that we can safeguard ourselves from that trap, so that we can find the joy of our salvation, which is resting in what you've done for us. Even as we get to walk into the many good works that you've created beforehand for us to walk into, that we would be walking into them as people who are rested, mind, body, and soul. Lord, I thank you for all the many ways you've been teaching me this, and I thank you for the opportunity you've given me to share that with others. I pray that you would help it land in fertile soil so that we could bear the fruit that you intended to. I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.